Is an Instagram from Josh Jacobs. You see the bandage there on the calf, and a lot of people speculating injury, meaning Josh Jacobs not available for the Raiders game against the Broncos. But following this good Zoom action, he shares it's not a football injury, just had an infection. And earlier, our NFL insider Ian Rappaport said, do not count out Josh Jacobs when it comes to the Raiders-Broncos Week 17 in a must-win game that still carries playoff implications. Also, calf injury this time, not infection, but calf injury. Mark Ingram has shared that he believes he will, in fact, not only believes, but is confident, thanks to the Ravens having that number one seed and getting a bye through the first round of Wild Card Weekend, that he will be ready to go for the playoffs. It's been the last two games, 6 interceptions and a passer rating that screams you cannot start me in a must-win Week 17. Yet, thanks to injuries, once again, it will be a chuck-it-duck contest. And you see the clinching scenarios for both of these teams. Right now, the Titans have the advantage. If they win, they are in as the 6th and final team in the AFC playoffs. They have to defeat the Houston Texans. They're good. Now, if they lose that game to Houston, they simply need Pittsburgh to lose to the Ravens and Indianapolis to lose to the Jaguars. For the Steelers, a little bit more complicated. They have to win. They also need Tennessee to lose. And then you see a host of other things, machinations, that would allow them to punch their ticket. But having lost to the Jets last week, they now have ceded control to their own destiny to the Tennessee Titans. And we now go to Pittsburgh, where she is currently sorting out if it's going to be savory or sweet for today's Kiesel crepes at the 2-Minute Grill. It is our Aditi Kinkhabwala. The Steelers, as we mentioned. How long did that one take you? How long did it take you to come up with that one, Matt? Maybe like 45 seconds. We can put together a menu together inside of 10 minutes. But cooking those crepes would be a different task entirely. It's Duck Hodges, Aditi. He is going to be under center. How are the Steelers approaching this must-win contest?
Well, the Steelers are certainly hoping that duck is not on the menu come Sunday in Baltimore. Oh, yeah. But I'll say this, going back to what you asked, it is indeed a spicy week. What do I mean by that? Wide receiver James Washington said that you can tell the pressure is on. He said it's just the way that guys are coming to work, how tight everybody is in terms of their details, focusing on execution in practice. He also said it's a hot week. But now when I talked to the veteran linebacker Vince Williams, he said, well, we've been hot since week 5. He said it's basically been must-win since then. Now, of course, last week in New Jersey was a must-win situation. That's when the Steelers ceded control of this race. Minkah Fitzpatrick said we weren't as good on our execution as we could have been. That's why there's a greater focus right now. And then, of course, as you mentioned at the top, Duck Hodges, the Steelers are certainly hoping that he can be a little bit looser, because when he was loose, he was playing better. When he's feeling the pressure, he's not playing as well. Thus far, practice has gone well, and the Steelers just hope that they can score, or they'll need their defense to score.
Now, the puns and the shameless promotion of our partnership in our 2-Minute Grill restaurant that will be opening at an undisclosed date in somewhere, I don't know, the immediate or foreseeable future. I don't need to say anything about Ben Roethlisberger, but what has Ben been saying about his return in 2020?
Well, Ben has certainly been enjoying eating as of late, so maybe he will be one of our favorite patrons. Look, Ben Roethlisberger has been very, very consistent since he was injured week 2, that he plans to come back. He plans to fulfill the rest of his contract. And I feel extremely confident telling you, Matt, that of that storied draft class with Eli Manning and Philip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger will most likely be the last man standing. He is extremely determined, as he said in his own statement yesterday, to return. And I saw him a few weeks ago after that Sunday night game against the Bills. And he said to me that standing there on the field in a big moment like that, that atmosphere, it makes him all the more hungry to come back. So there's no questions here. Ben Roethlisberger is expecting to make a full recovery. And if he ever doubted his value to his team, he cannot now after this season.
All right. Just one real quick one. Did we sell out of the green eggs and jack ham yesterday? I'm sorry. I had to do it. All right. Thank you, Aditi. In Week 15, after falling behind 14-0 to the Texans, the Titans managed to rally and tied up in the fourth quarter before Houston pulled away, took control of the AFC South. Still, the Titans are still alive, and with a Week 17 win, would be in.
I like winning, and so I think we have to make sure that we do whatever we can do to win. And again, that wasn't, we haven't done enough the last 2 weeks. So if Sunday we need to throw it 50 times, and we'll have to throw it 50 times, and we have to throw it 23 times, then that's, how many we're going to have to throw.
Now we get to Tennessee, where our Tiffany Blackman is fresh out of the Titans locker room. And Tiffany, certainly the number one question on everybody's mind is the status of Derrick Henry, who missed that Week 17 game versus the Saints.
Yeah, he's been dealing with a hamstring injury, but he said today he will be ready to go. You mentioned that he missed that game. Well, the Titans knew going into last week that this game against the Texans on Sunday was what their playoff hopes are riding on. It's a win and you're in. Now, Henry did reiterate for all of us that decision to rest him was an organizational one. And Coach Mike Vrabel, he was asked how Derrick looked during practice on Tuesday. He said, great, and left it at that. Here's what else we do know. The Titans are 6-0 when Derrick Henry rushes for 90 yards or more. And it's not just about what happens when he has the football in his hands. This offense, Ryan Tannehill, they've been so successful in running a play action, and you can do that when you've got a solid run game. Now, I did talk with Henry about that just a little bit ago, and he told me this. When you're running the ball and it's working well for the offense, I think whenever you do play action, I think defenses tend to bite more. He said that's been a focal point for us as an offense, staying locked in the run game. He said the play action has been great for us, and it's turning into touchdowns. I also talked with offensive lineman Taylor Lewan, and he told me that their run game, has been doing a great job just as a whole, and those guys have been doing a great job in blocking for them. But he also went on to say that Derrick's done a great job of breaking tackles and being a threat, so he deserves people noticing him and making sure they know where he's at all times.
Yeah, and I would assume the celebration of Henry would be greater were Ryan Tannehill not the conversation. I mean, saved their season, 6-3 as the starter and has the best passer rating since being installed as the starter at the position of quarterback in the National Football League. Kind of the status of Ryan Tannehill following 2 losses in a row, because really it was nothing but roses since he came back.
Yeah, it really was. And it's not just about, his success isn't just about teams keying in on Derrick Henry in that run game, because last week he threw for 3 touchdowns. But you look at what he's done just in these last 6 games, 14 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. And his quarterback's coach, Pat O'Hara, who just spoke with all of us coming off the field a little bit ago, or going on to the field, I should say. They're just getting started with practice. But he said that Tannehill's been extremely focused and driven. His competitiveness has shown in critical situations. That's something I did speak with Luan about, too. He said that Tannehill just has this great sense of urgency, and he has been coming into those huddles just with so much confidence in the way that he's been commanding the guys and rallying them, too.
All right, Tiffany, we appreciate it. So much at stake. A win, and they are in. Same thing as we discussed with Aditi, win with a little bit of help. Here is your look at the AFC playoff picture. We know the path to Miami will go through Baltimore. Outside of that, there is so much up for grabs, as our researcher, my young Padawan researcher, Garrett, told me. 64, Garrett, is that correct? 64 scenarios for the AFC playoffs based on what could potentially happen in Week 17.
Jones looks flat, caught, now throws it down the left sideline, completes it for the touchdown of Sterling Shepard. Barkley's wide open for the touchdown, 33 yards. Completes it to Latimer, who fights for the end zone, touchdown. 4th touchdown pass for Daniel Jones. Touchdown Giants, and they win it in overtime. How about the maturation of Daniel Jones leading his team in overtime to the victory?
Fabs, we say it every year. Adjust your fantasy settings. Avoid a Week 17 schedule with a ton of starters sitting it out. But many of us resist change. And I get it. There are still millions of league championships still in play. So help out those millions of games that will be played in Week 17 with some starts this week.
Yeah, this is a rough week. But, hey, we're going to navigate through it. First off, I'm starting Dak Prescott. Now, I get it. He gave you a stinker last week. But the Cowboys still have a shot to win the NFC East. As a Cowboys fan, I still don't get it. But, heck, this is a great matchup against the Redskins. They just gave up 5 touchdown passes to Daniel Jones. So get Dak into your lineup. I'm also starting Marlon Mack, who was a starter for me last week. had a great game against the Carolina Panthers. This week he's got the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've allowed 7 touchdowns and the most fantasy points to running backs since week 13. And finally, Rashad Perriman. I mean, this guy has become a very valuable fantasy asset, giving you double-digit fantasy points in 4 straight weeks. He's the #1 wide receiver on a team that throws the ball 40 times per game on average. So the matchup's also pretty good against Atlanta. So Perriman is a wide receiver too.
All right, now we got to decide whom we're going to sit. Obviously, outside of these starters that are resting, make sure you pay attention to that. But those that are actually playing in Week 17, we are sitting whom?
Well, Ryan Fitzpatrick has been like one of the hottest quarterbacks in fantasy football for the last month, but he's got the Patriots this week, and the Patriots still have something to play for. It's a home game. Quarterbacks have averaged the fewest fantasy points per game when playing at Gillette Stadium, so I don't know that there'll be any Fitz magic this week in New England. I'm also sitting Marshawn Lynch. He's back, right? But you can't play him right now. He hasn't played in over a year. And Pete Carroll is saying that the Seahawks are going to lean on Travis Homer this week. So if you start a Seahawks running back, it should be Homer and not Marshawn Lynch. What a strange analysis. And finally, Mike Williams, who had given you double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, has scored 2 touchdowns in his last 3. But the Kansas City Chiefs have given up the second fewest fantasy points to perimeter receivers this year. So Mike Williams in a game where Phillip Rivers may or may not play. Again, that's the difficulty of playing in Week 17. Williams is a fade for me.
Yeah, only 2 touchdowns this year for Mike Williams, which is just